flag.
That's it.
That's fine. Thank you very much. Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome to those in attendance at this remote meeting of the local review body of Aberdeen City Council. My name is Councillor Mary Bolton, and I'll be chairing the first review. Today, Councillors Donna Clark and John Cook are in attendance and will be participating. Councillor Del Hendrickson will chair the remaining two reviews after this one. Please note that the meeting will be recorded and published online for the public access after the meeting. You're also reminded to note that we may have members of the public or press observing today's proceedings. Can I ask those who are observing today's meeting to keep their microphones and cameras switched off throughout the whole meeting? Can members of the review body leave their cameras on but mute their microphones when not speaking? As the local review body contains quasi-judicial business, members are reminded that they should not leave the meeting during consideration of any of the reviews. The meeting has been convened in response to 3 requests for a review of decisions taken by the appointed officer under the Council scheme of delegation. Members of the local review body have before them copies of the review documents as listed in the notice calling the meeting. I will now ask Mr. Mark Masson, the Assistant Clerk, to outline the procedure to be followed to conduct these reviews. Mr. Masson, over to yourself.
Thank you, Chair. Members have the procedure note which was circulated with the meeting papers and is intended to set out the wider framework within which the review process operates. From this, it is clear that the first task for the review body is to come to a decision on whether the review documents contain sufficient information for the case to be determined without further procedure, and by that it is meant without further information or representations. To assist, I feel it would be helpful to mention the following. Firstly, that the regulations governing the local review process require that all matters which the applicant intends to raise in the review must be set out in or accompany the notice review. Secondly, that the focus of the review should be on the basis of what was before the appointed officer when a decision was made, and only in exceptional circumstances will new or additional matters be permitted to be taken into account. Thirdly, to note that the modernisation of the planning system, which included revisal of the planning appeals process, of which this local review body is part, removed the previous right on the part of an applicant to insist on a hearing and replaced that with a local review body, providing them with the power to choose a procedure which more accurately reflects the facts and circumstances of the individual case. And lastly, that guidance issued by the Scottish Government's Chief Planner in 2011 stated that reviews by local review bodies should be conducted by means of full consideration of the application afresh. This review should take the form of a structured discussion led by the chairperson to consider the matter set out in the notice of review before you, and I would conclude by drawing your attention in particular to points 10 to 12 of the procedure note. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Masson. Excuse me, turning to consideration of the first review in respect of the decision to refuse the application for the change of use to provide an external seating area with 3 seating pods at the road to the front of 13 Correction Wynd, Aberdeen, AB10 1HP, planning reference 220919/DPP. We will now hear from the planning advisor in attendance, Ms. Lucy Green, who will provide us with a brief description of the application proposal and a reminder of the reason why the application was refused. I would point out that Ms. Green attends today's meeting to provide us with the necessary professional planning guidance because she has not been involved in the earlier consideration of the application under review. Ms. Green will not, however, be asked to express any views on the merits of the proposed development, and in effect, her role will be a neutral one involving the provision of factual information and guidance only. And if I could just hand over to Ms. Green to describe the application. Ms. Green.
Thank you, Convener. I'll just share my screen.
That's fine. Yeah.
Okay, can you see that fine?
Yeah, that's fine. Thanks, Lucy.
Okay, this review relates to an application for the change of use to provide an external seating area with 3 seating pods. And the review was submitted with all the necessary information within the time limit of 3 months following the decision of the appointed officer. The applicant has indicated on the notice that there are no new matters been raised in the review submissions. And in terms of procedure by which the review will be conducted, the applicant has expressed the view that the review may proceed on the basis of the information submitted. So I'll provide some background information on the case before handing back for members to discuss and ask any questions. So this is the site location plan. Just in blue is the Red Robin records, and shown in red is the location of the seating pods. So the site is part of the carriageway on Correction Wynd within the city centre, also within the city centre conservation area. And on either side of the site are the walls of the Category A listed churchyard, St Nicholas Kirk, and then Category B and C listed buildings on Correction Wynd. And this is the proposed site plan, just showing the location of the seating pods. And just to note on here, that's the pedestrian passageway and then the vehicular pend that's referred to in some of the documents. It's the front elevation of the Red Robin Records premises, just showing the vehicular pend to the left and the pedestrian pend on the right there. Floor plan of the building, just showing a small cafe area and a plan showing the seating pods in relation to the front of the premises. So this is just showing one of the pods. They are approximately 1.2 meters by 2 meters and 1.9 meters high. And this is just showing the elevations of the pods, clad in timber linings, which have been painted. And these are photographs from street view. So the pods are not there at the moment. They've been removed from the site, but they were there at the point these street view photos were taken, obviously. Otherwise, the street remains the same. That's just looking from the Union Street side. Closer up view. So the reasons for the decision, which I've put on full in this slide, but I won't read it all out. So there's the character and appearance of the Union Street conservation area, detrimental impact on that, and also on the setting of various listed buildings and their curtilage due to the design materials and finishes of the pods, and that therefore the proposal would be contrary to design policies and policies on the historic environment, as well as the conservation area character appraisal and national guidance in Scottish planning policy and the historic environment policy for Scotland. And then the second reason was that the pods would obstruct driver visibility along Correction Wynd and from the pend serving the parking area, which was just on the left as we were looking at the elevation there, on to the left of the shop unit, with an impact on safety, and that the proposal was therefore contrary to policy T2 on managing transport impact and similar policies within the proposed plan and supplementary guidance. So for the applicant, the point was made that the area is now a pedestrian priority area with access further limited. Sightlines shouldn't be a reason for refusal with access through the pend, meaning that sightlines are impossible to achieve anyway. The there's a previous application which also came to LRB where the refusal was upheld, and the applicant makes the point that councillors at that LRB felt that sightlines could be addressed and urged councillors at this current LRB to watch that recording. The next point was that the design and finish of the pods could be adjusted, and that efforts had been made to discuss that with planners, which weren't successful. That there are other similar structures elsewhere within the conservation area. Further reasons, I've mentioned that first point already about watching the previous LRB, that the proposal would provide sheltered outdoor seating area and allow the cafe to expand, and if that was successful they would be able to move to bigger premises. They highlighted that there'd been no complaints from neighbours, that the levels of traffic on Correction Wynd are very low, that there are now no parking bays on Correction Wynd. They talked about the cost of the application, the seating itself, and other financial implications of running a cafe in challenging times. And finally, that small businesses should be supported by the council. In terms of consultations and representations, the Roads DM team objected to the application. And they stated that since the previous application, nothing has fundamentally changed to remove the road safety concerns, and that there's a lack of supplementary information to justify the resubmission of the application. They highlighted the additional sentence that Correction Wynd, that's single sentence from the applicant, that is, that Correction Wynd is now designated as pedestrian priority. Previously there was restricted access with entry and exit via the green. So roads also state that their view is that their view was never that the road was heavily trafficked. It was simply that the pods blocked visibility from the loading and parking area to the side of the site, and that concern remains. So on the grounds that it's unsafe, they would recommend that the application was refused. Environmental Health commented on the application and recommended conditions to be attached to any approval, and those were relating to no amplified noise, music that should be, and also the hours of operation. Street Occupations commented, which is part of the wider roads team, and they stated that no pavement cafe permit would be issued, due both to the loss of revenue from on-street parking bays and also visibility issues for vehicles exiting the internal car park. So the same point is made by the roads team. There were two objections. Firstly, on the point that this was an inappropriate use of public space, and secondly, that it was an ugly addition to the street without merit and it would detract from the area and shouldn't be built on a public highway. The City Centre Community Council didn't send any response. So at this point, I'll hand back to members to decide whether there's any further information required and/or a site visit and how to proceed.
Thank you very much, Ms. Green. We now need to consider whether we have the sufficient information in front of us to take a decision today on the application. Members, remember that if you do not feel you have enough information to take the decision, you can request further written information be provided, hearings to be arranged, or a site visit to be undertaken. I'm content that we have enough information in front of us today, for myself anyway, to determine the application. Councillor Cook.
Yeah, I agree with you, convener.
Okay, and Councillor Clark.
I agree with this also.
Okay, as members feel that they have sufficient information, we will now hear from Ms. Green on the relevant policies and consideration for this review. Back to yourself, Ms. Green.
Thank you. I'll just share my screen again. Right, so in terms of policies, the site lies within the city centre, so policy NC1 would apply, and this talks about whether development contributes towards the delivery of a vision for the regional centre, that vision being expressed in the city centre master plan. And also that the city centre is preferred location for uses such as retail, office, hotel, cultural uses and other significant footfall generating uses. So proposals for uses within those types would generally be welcomed. So it's not really directly relevant to this case, which, although it does support a use that would comply with the policy. Policy NC2 talks about the retail core, and this site falls within that. Again, the policy's not directly instructive. It relates to other uses, changes of use from retail to other uses, and then there's a series of criteria. The criteria, some of the points raise issues which are relevant considerations, whether the use would contribute to the wider city centre master plan, whether the use would make a contribution to vitality and viability of the city centre, creates and maintains active street frontages. Those are the most relevant ones. We're just moving on to design policy D1, obviously ensuring high standards of design, taking into account the context, which is in this case is obviously the conservation area and listed buildings. It talks also about welcoming, safe and pleasant areas that are easy to move around. Policy D4 on the historic environment refers to the conservation area and listed buildings, and that development should respect the character, appearance of setting of those. And then this policy T2 on managing the transport impact, and this was referred to in the second reason for refusal. So it talks about new developments in terms of traffic generation and maximising opportunities for sustainable and active travel. So it's for councillors to consider whether the proposal would be at odds with that. SPP, which will soon be superseded by the National Planning Framework, which now has significant weight, makes reference to, again, as per the policy that I mentioned before, the setting of listed buildings and the character of conservation areas. And I've just got a slide on the policies from the Historic Environment Policy for Scotland. I won't go through all of those, but those emphasise, again, looking at having an understanding of the historic environment and the sort of background to its significance and how the proposal would affect that. City centre conservation area character appraisal is relevant for this particular area. It falls within character area 3, Marshall Street and the Green, etc. It's just highlighted by the yellow star there. And correction wind is mentioned in quite a few of the paragraphs within that. It talks about the medieval layout of Aberdeen in the street pattern, the fact that Union Street sort of flies over the top of correction wind, the positive characteristics of the area, including its streetscape, uses and activity, high quality materials in key areas. In terms of negatives, it mentions building maintenance, street bins and vacant units. And then it talks about views from Union Street along correction wind with St Nicholas Kirk noted as being important to the character of the area. some more sections from the character appraisal. Just talking about the character of streets like Correction Wynd. There's further mention of St Nicholas Churchyard and the solid walls along the side of Correction Wynd. And finally, overall points for consideration in determining the application. Do members consider that the proposed structures are consistent with the vision for the city centre in terms of NC1? And would the development be of a type supported by the criteria within policy NC2? In terms of historic environment, how do members consider that the works would impact on the character of the conservation area and the setting of nearby listed buildings? In terms of design, is the design of sufficient quality? Residential amenity, obviously environmental health had recommended conditions in terms of noise and hours of operation, and there are flats above the premises on Correction Wynd, and then the implications for vehicle movements that's been highlighted. So overall, does the proposal comply with the development plan as a whole, or other material considerations which would indicate otherwise? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Green. Members, do you have questions for Ms. Green? Councillor Cook?
No, I think I've got enough information at this point.
Okay, Councillor Clark?
I was wondering if it's possible to get the map back up that shows you the parking area, how close it is to the pod, your photograph presentation that was on earlier. I was wondering if I could possibly see that again. That's all I'm wanting to.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, just a moment. I did go out on site this morning because the applicant says in their statement that the parking spaces are no longer there. So I looked on site. Obviously the pods are no longer there. And the sign that indicates disabled parking remains there, while the parking spaces are actually, the paint is very, very faint.
That one, Councillor, or is it? You're on mute, Councillor Clark.
Yes, that's fine. That's what I was requiring to see. Thank you.
I think, yeah, I mean, the
no further questions.
Okay.
The sign is actually to the right of that, so parking bays are kind of in front of the pedestrian pend, just to the side, really. Yeah.
So I take it that
Sorry.
signs will go.
Sorry.
The signs will be removed, will they? So no need to cause confusion that it looks like it's a parking bay.
Well, the parking bay looks as if it would just sort of abut where the pods would be. I mean, it's just disabled parking rather than that. That's what appears to be on site from my visit this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Can I just check? In the report, it says that there's been no amendments at all. So this is basically a resubmission of the original application. Is that correct?
It is, yes. I think the only change is the mention of the pedestrian priority area, which is a change in circumstance that the applicants brought up.
Okay, can I just ask, I mean, previously, if somebody tried to submit basically the same application again, that it wouldn't necessarily have been, would have refused to determine it because it was just a resubmission of the same application. I just wondered if, I know that there's a time, for so long, and it seems like yesterday it was here, but perhaps it was, I think it was December 2021. Is that right?
That was the previous decision. I think it was at LRB last year.
Okay.
Yes, I mean, we might do that if it was a third time. There are provisions to to refuse to determine a repeat application. I mean, the applicants just highlighted that change in circumstance.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Ms. Green. Okay. Any other questions, members? No. Okay. In accordance with the procedure notes circulated, the local review body will now discuss and determine the manner in which the review is to proceed. I would highlight that all representations relating to the case have been considered and taken into account. If I could perhaps kick off, it's all the old adage about you can have a good thing, but if it's not in the right place, it's not that the idea is wrong, it's perhaps just the location is not right. Now, I would agree that there's a number of areas where this application does comply, and I think we've always got to be mindful in planning. We're there to make development happen. There's a presumption that we will assist development, not prohibit it. But I think there has to be a certain level of reasoning for us to be able to do that. And on this one, I think my biggest challenge, or two challenges, obviously, is the impact on the conservation area, but also the fact that roads have maintained their objection on road safety grounds. And that gives me a real concern, because if we went against the roads, and there was an incident, I think it would cause us quite a bit of difficulty. But I do think that it is, we've got D1, which is design now, quality placemaking. The design of the pods, you could argue is subjective. However, they wouldn't be my cup of tea, and I don't think they contribute anything to the conservation area. And I think I might have been more comfortable if there'd been an attempt, even if they hadn't managed to agree with officers, put in something that showed the attempt to change, but there's been nothing. It is, as and that's why I confirmed with Ms. Green, the same application to all intents and purposes. Councillor Cook, would you like to contribute something?
Well, I think you've said basically pretty much what I was thinking. I mean, I kind of looked at this and I thought I'd take the point about needing to support small businesses. I take the point about we want to encourage cafe culture, etc. I think you made a good point about transport. I mean, I've walked along that street a number of times, and there's never any traffic there, so you kind of think, but then I don't want to second guess what the roads team are saying on safety. But for me, the clincher is D4 and the historic environment aspects of NPF 4. So yeah, I think, as you said at the outset, there's such a thing as a good thing, but it's got to be in the right place. So I'm with you on this one.
Okay, Councillor Clark.
I am likewise. I'm concerned about what the roads department say. I'm also concerned that there's no change from the previous time. And also, I do agree with Historic Scotland. The pods are not quite, I would have liked to have seen them more in keeping with the area and the colours of the area. But there is nothing changed from the previous meeting, so likewise with yourselves, totally agree.
Yeah, I mean, the only one that D2, where it's speaking about sustainable traffic transport, I would argue against, because I think that it doesn't generate traffic, and there's access to walking, cycling, and buses nearby. So I don't think that that's a particularly strong argument. But I would support the other comments made by the officers and reasons for refusal. So given that, can I just is that a unanimous decision? Yeah, I think it's clear from the members that we are keen to enable development, but it has to be the right development in the right location. And unfortunately, on this occasion, we've been unable to reach that conclusion. So it's a unanimous decision that will uphold the officer's recommendation. Sorry, Ms. Green.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to check. Do you want the reference to T2 removed from the reason for refusal?
Yeah, because I don't think it really stacks up in terms of sustainable transport, because we've heard that there is bus routes that are cycle with our new bikes, and people can walk there. So I think we're unanimous that it's not really a strong argument that would stand up to any scrutiny. Okay, right. Thank you very much. And with that, folks, I will duck out and hand over to Councillor Hendrickson, and I wish you well with the next 2 applications. Thank you very much, folks. Take care.
Thank you for
Bye.
chairing.
Cheerio.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
As we're doing a
Thank you,
quick
Councillor Bolton,
hand-
and enjoy the rest of your day.
as we're having a quick
Councillor Cook.
handover, could we have a quick 2-minute comfort break?
That's fine with me.
I'll be back in a second. I've had too much coffee this morning. Sorry about that. I'm back.
So I see, Councillor Cook. Well, good morning, everyone. We now turn to the second review, if everyone's ready, in respect to the decision to refuse the application for extension of porch, 1.5-storey extension to the north elevation, dormer extensions and detached domestic garage at Kings Hill, Kings Wells, Aberdeen, AB 15 HQB. Planning reference number 211447/DPP. We will now hear from the planning advisor in attendance, Ms. Green, who will provide us with a brief description of the application proposal and a reminder of the reasons why the application was refused. I would again point out that Ms. Green also attends today's meeting to provide us with the necessary professional planning guidance because she has not been involved with the early consideration of the application under review. Ms. Green will not, however, be asked to express any view on the merits of the proposed developments, and in effect, her role will be a neutral one involving the provision of factual information and guidance over to you, Ms. Green. And I can see your slides.
Thank you, convener. Let's wait for them to come up properly for me. Right. So this review relates to the refusal of an application at Kings Hill for the erection of porch, 1.5-storey extension, dormers and detached garage. And the review was submitted with all the necessary information within the time limit of 3 months following the decision of the appointed officer. The applicant has indicated that no new matters have been submitted in the review. And in terms of procedure by which the review should be conducted, the applicant has expressed the view that there should be a site visit to inspect the site rather than proceeding purely on the basis of submitted information. So I'll first provide some background to the case before handing back to you, convener, for members to decide how to proceed. an aerial photograph just showing the house with the flat roofed element to the rear and the existing driveway. And just here was in existence on the site, but I've been told that's now been demolished. And you can see that the road down to Countess Wells is in the process of being built there, and that's now pretty much complete. So this is just looking from the north at the house, which is here. And then this is Countess Wells being developed, and there's some flats being built here. We're a bit further on than this photograph shows. There's permission's been granted for Barratt's to build in this area. And the edge of the Countess Wells site is along here. This isn't allocated for development, so that would currently remain as so this is the house and the flat roofed element to the north, to the rear. Street view image of it. And there's a change in levels of approximately 1 metre from the north end of the site to the south side of the house. Again, another street view image. And this looking from the southeast, from the new road to Countess Wells. You can see the south elevation of the house there. And site plan as existing. So this is, the north is at the bottom of the plan. So this is the flat story element of the house, and then the sort of more traditional stone element. And these are the plans as proposed. So looking at the floor plan, this is the existing house. This is the flat story element, and then this extension would be added with a pitched roof and the detached garage, and that's the porch just to the front there. There's a couple of cross sections through the house. So this is looking directly through the centre of the house as proposed, and then looking lengthways down it is this section. Oops, on to the next slide. So the extension would have a maximum height of 5.6 metres, with the ridges at 5.5 metres and the eaves at 2.8 metres. And the extension would project 6 metres beyond the existing flat roofed extension. The porch would include an entrance door and would project out 2.6 metres. You can see the materials noted on that plan. So there would be the reuse of reclaimed granite, and then there would be off-white render on concrete blockwork, and the roof would be clad in natural slate, with the flat roof element in a single ply roofing membrane in dark grey. The windows, timber aluminium clad units, dark grey finish, and a hardwood entrance door. And that's just showing you the elevation. And again, a comparison of the existing south elevation, just showing the proposed. So the changes are to the proportions of the windows, dormer windows, The ground floor windows have also been changed, although that would be permitted development. North elevation of the house, the garage isn't in that north elevation, so that would sit in front here. And that's the existing north elevation. And then the east elevation and the existing east elevation on that side. So that would be facing the new Countess Wells Road, well, across an area of green space. And then the elevations of the proposed garage with reclaimed granite on the front and render on the other elevations. So reasons for refusal from the report of handling, summarised as the excessive massing, projection to the rear and the dominant built elements, inconsistent design features, the size of footprint relative to the original house, by which they mean the original pitched roof element, discounting the flat roofed part of the existing house. That it detracts from the character and amenity of the area, and that it would be contrary, therefore, to policy D1 on design, the householder design guide, and policies D1 and D2, D2's amenity in the proposed plan. For the applicant's case, a number of points made. First of all, that the character of the house was compromised when the roof form was changed and the dormer was installed. That's the large flat roof dormer across the south elevation. That the footprint of the building previously included the area to the north, so that would be the flat roofed section of the house, albeit not that flat roofed element that currently exists, but there's something shown on the 1901 Ordnance Survey, which is the applicant submitted in their supplementary statement, and that it does show a sort of square footprint as if there was something there. We don't know what that was. The next point is that the proposal is of superior quality and has a more traditional roof, a less brutal dormer than the existing one, and overall that there's design cohesion. That the materials are consistent with the local vernacular. The applicant states that the existing footprint is 122 metres squared, whilst the proposed is 188 metres squared, with that being a 54% increase. By the new development at Countess Wells, and that the proposal wouldn't detract from that. Graph. Final point being that there are very few examples of vernacular architecture in the area. In terms of consultations, there was no objection from the roads team and no comments from Cults, Beeldside and Mill Timber Community Council, and there were also no representations received. So I'll now hand back to you, convener, for members to decide how to proceed.
Thank you, Ms. Green. We now need to consider whether we have sufficient information in front of us today to take a decision on the application. And members, remember, if you do not feel you have enough information to take a decision, you can request that further written information be provided, hearings be arranged, or a site visit to be undertaken. I think I've got sufficient information to make a decision today. Councillor Cook, could you please state if you have sufficient information?
Yep, I think I've got sufficient information on what we've got.
Thank you. Councillor Clark, could you please state if you have sufficient information to take a decision?
I feel I've got enough information.
Thank you. As members feel that they have sufficient information, we will now hear from Ms Green on the relevant policies and considerations for this review.
Thank you. So in terms of development plan considerations, the proposed plan has not yet been adopted, so the 2017 plan remains extant, with both sets of policies being relevant and material considerations. NPF 4 now also carries significant weight as it's been approved by the Scottish Parliament and will be adopted in February, and that will form part of the development plan as well. Site for residential development under LR1 land release. And the proposal wouldn't jeopardise the implementation of Countess Wells. So it can be considered under policy H1, which is relevant for new residential developments as well. And it states that new householder development will be approved in principle if it complies with the various criteria within the policy. So the particular ones, does it constitute overdevelopment? Would it have an unacceptable impact on the character and amenity of the area? There wouldn't be any loss of open space, so criteria 3 not so relevant, and criteria 4, the householder development guide would be relevant there. So turning to the householder development guide, that states that extensions should be architecturally compatible in design and scale. In terms of the footprint, the house as extended shouldn't exceed twice that of the original dwelling. And in terms of rear extensions, these will be determined on a site-by-site basis for detached houses. The design policy is relevant, and the policy recognises that not all development will be of a scale that makes a significant placemaking impact, but it recognises that good design and detail add to the attractiveness of the built environment. And further relevant policies, natural heritage, a study of bats took place and it showed that bats are unlikely to use the building. In terms of transport, there's adequate parking in the view of the roads department and in terms of our standards. And amenity, that would be relevant in terms of impact on other nearby houses, so privacy, daylighting and sunlighting. Overall, the evaluation should be on the basis of the development plan, unless material considerations indicate otherwise. So the basis for the decision would be, how does the proposal affect the design character and amenity of the area as set out in residential areas policy, design policy, and the householder development guide? Does the proposal comply with the development plan when considered as a whole, or are there material considerations which would weigh for or against the proposal? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Greens. Are there any questions from Ms Green? Councillor Cook.
Thanks. Yeah, just to confirm my understanding, this isn't a listed building and it's not a conservation area.
No, that's
Thanks.
correct.
Thank you. Just wanted to check that.
Councillor Clark, do you have any questions?
No, I've no questions.
I just wonder if, Ms. Green, we could go back to the side plans from the west, I think it was. I have a couple of questions about what we're actually looking at, because when I was reading through the report and even looking at the original plans, I was actually quite confused as to what was happening. And I think those slides actually help.
Is this the elevations?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's the one. That's the
Right.
one I'm looking at.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm just looking at that, and as we're looking at the I'll try and get you in the right place. The flat roofed part of this building is basically between the sort of north point of the gable and the chimney pot as we're looking at it on the south side. So all of that is flat with the little dormer window in it.
The flat part that's this element here. So that's the original. That would be the original or the existing house.
Okay, so is the bit in between the two granite parts of the building with the dormer in it, is that a pitched roof? Or is that-
Yes.
It is.
Let me just go back to the plan. So you can see here, that's the existing pitched roof part of the house, and then this would be a flat roof, the flat roofed section. So part of the flat roof would remain with this glazing, and then this is a pitched roof at right angles, and that's the new sort of separate element at the back.
I think I'm even
Well, not
more
separate, but
I
sorry.
I think I'm even more confused now. It looks to me, if you look at the section through AA,
Yeah.
it does appear to be a flat roof, but with a sort of pitched bit going up to it. So it looks to me as if it's a bit of both. I'm just trying to get clarity as
Oh, I
to.
see what you mean, that part of it.
Yes.
Yes, I mean, they would appear as dormers, I suppose, from the side, which is why, yeah, that bit,
Yeah.
yes, that's the adjoining section. Yeah, so that, yes, that part would be flat.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, because I was looking at on the plans earlier. Now I was really confused as to what was happening. Can we go back to the other view? I'm just trying to get a sense of the impact of. Okay. Yeah, sorry about this. I'm back.
That would be a sloping roof.
Yeah, up as far as, yeah, so yeah, so it'd be a sloping roof as far as sort of the line that runs through the bottom of the dormer, and then it would be vertical and then a flat roof on top of that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Yes. Thank you, Ms. Green. That's cleared up an awful lot, because I was confused as to what was happening. Yeah, that's very useful. So it's that bit is a sort of combination of sloping roof and sloping wall, vertical wall, and then a flat roof.
Yeah, that joining, that bit joining the two elements.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Right. In accordance with the procedure now, any further questions on the basis of that? No. In accordance with the procedure note circulated, the local review body will now discuss and decide the matter in which the review is to proceed. I would highlight that all representations relating to the case have been considered and taken into account. I think I might be minded to overturn the decision here and approve it. I was slightly concerned about the impact of the flat roof on the sides of the building, but as it's a partial sloped roof wall with vertical elements, I think it actually fits in with the extension to the north, which is gabled. I like the use of the granite, which I presume is from the steading, bearing in mind that it's close to a relatively new development. I think it will fit in. I was concerned about the flat roof element, but now that that's been explained, it's not that visible from anywhere else. So with regards to the policy, I think it just fits in with acceptable development. So I'm actually happy that it's an interesting development. So that's my thought on it. Councillor Cook.
Yeah, I'm with you, Convener. I would strongly feel that we ought to support this and approve it. If we look at the reasons for the original refusal on page 53 of the pack, it basically says it would detract from the character and visual amenity of the area. I think if you look at the particular, I don't think that's definitely not my view. I've got completely the opposite view. Some of the photos that Ms. Green showed in her presentation reinforce that view, but if you look at the photos on pages sort of 75, 76 and thereabouts of the pack, you can see that the a lot of the or the other few old houses in the area have got a variety of materials in them. And if you look more broadly at the new Counters Wells development, you've got a whole range of different architectural styles. So to my mind, that this is perfectly acceptable from my perspective in terms of policies H1, D1, and as I say, I don't think it detracts from the character and amenity of the area, so I'd be strongly in favour of approval.
Thank you, Councillor Cook. Councillor Clark.
Like yourselves, I support and approve the development. I wish to overturn the decision. I've been looking at the photographs closely and I feel there's no two houses in that area exactly the same, and especially with the new development. It's not blocking the nearest house by the height of the dormers, etc. And as I say, there's no two the same. It's not affecting neighbours. It's not putting extra traffic on the road. And I'm happy to support and overturn the decision.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. So I think we've got a unanimous decision there to overturn the planning officer's recommendation, and I presume it would be, we would find it acceptable under policy D1. Can I just have a little bit of guidance as to the correct policy to use? Would that be the right one?
D1 relates to design and H1 is the residential areas. So both of them would look at character of the surrounding area.
Yeah, okay. I was just looking at D1 for the design. I'm happy that it does fit fit within policy D1. I'm happy with that. I was concerned initially about the flat roof element, but having looked at the plans, it wasn't clear that there was actually a sort of slopey bit that went up the side of it, if you understand. And I think it does actually fit in with policy D1. And it's quite encouraging to see that there's the reuse of granite in the property. So I take it, is that sufficient for the decision?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
I just want to make sure that we get it spot on.
And
Okay.
there's no conditions that Ms. Green can add to that. Nothing at all.
Hello, sorry, can I maybe come in as well? It's Lisa Christie from Legal.
Yes.
Just to say that Councillor Cook also mentioned H1, so would you also want to put that down as the reasons for your decision as well?
Yes, I'm happy with that. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Are there any conditions that the planning authorities would like put in place?
There's nothing that I would suggest. The materials are noted on the drawing, so I don't think we need one about that. No.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Green. Moving on. Oh, please note that a decision from today's meeting will be issued to the applicant and the agent in the forthcoming days. Now, turning to consideration of the third review in respect to the decision to refuse the application for the erection of a detached double garage with home office above Fairhill 275 North Deeside Road, Miltimber, Aberdeen, AB 13 OHA, planning reference number 220805/DPP. We will again hear from the planning advisor, Ms. Green, who will provide us with a brief description of the application proposal and a reminder of the reasons why the application was refused. I would again point out that Ms. Green attends today's meeting to provide us with the necessary professional planning guidance because she has not been involved in the early consideration of the application under review. Ms. Green will not, however, be asked to express any view on the merits of the proposed development, and in fact, her role will be a neutral one involving the provision of factual information and guidance only. Over to you again, Ms. Green.
Thank you, convener. Just get my slides up. So this review relates to application for the erection of a 1.5-storey garage at 275 North Deeside Road, and the review was submitted within the time limit of 3 months. Following the decision of the appointed officer, the applicant indicated that there are no new matters been raised in the review, and in terms of procedure, the applicant expressed the view that the review may proceed on the basis of the information submitted. So I'll proceed to provide some background information before handing back to members to decide how to proceed. This is site location plan. This is the site with a detached house within a large plot. It's a 2-storey house accessed off North Deeside Road and with garden ground bounded by Station Road East. And this orange arrow is pointing to the approximate location of the proposed garage. And there's a small existing garage alongside the eastern boundary of the garden, just shown there. And the garden also contains a number of mature trees, mainly around the edges, and these are protected by TPO. So more detailed location plan, just showing the existing house within its garden. And you can see that the driveway splits so that one route leads down to the rear of the house. And to the southeast of the house is noted in the report of handling. That that running parallel at a distance of approximately 8 metres from the eastern boundary, there's an overgrown path which has been identified as an old driveway, and that path extends from the hard standing which lies to the east of the property to the southern boundary, so it's approximately along this line. This is the aerial photograph just showing the house. Obviously all the trees are in leaf there and cover quite a large area of the site. And this is planners existing, showing the trees plotted on it and the existing shed there. These are street view from Station Road East. So you can see the house there and the existing ancillary building in the garden. And note the trees along this boundary. And this is just looking the other way up Station Road East, so you can see the house through the trees there on the left. The plan as proposed. So you can see in red the trees that would be removed, and those are 9 Sitka spruce and 2 Norway spruce. So 10 in the area of the garage, and a further tree would be removed, which is up here, just for management reasons. And it's proposed to plant 11 native trees, 8 Scots pine and 3 silver birch. So you can see that this is the plan of the garage. You can see the dots denoting the trees that would be removed. And the survey notes that they have limited life expectancy and recommends they be removed within 12 months. So 6 of the trees would rise to a height of 20 to 21 metres, and the remaining 5 would be between 12 and 19 metres in height, or are between those heights. And the survey recommends their removal, as I said before, with the possibility of planting a more diverse range of trees for their better long-term potential. So these are the plans of the proposed garage. See space for 2 cars on the ground floor, and then home office with a small bathroom above and stairs leading up to the upper level. And these are the elevations. So this front elevation of the garage would be in stone to match the house, Fernhill stone, and then the roof would also match the existing house. And these are the north and south elevations of the proposed garage. So in terms of the site history, there are 2 applications of particular relevance. There was a refusal in 2020 of a 1.5-storey garage, and that refusal was upheld by LRB. And I've noted the size there, so it was 7.6 metres square in footprint and 6 metres high to the ridge, with the reasons for refusal being the scale and massing and width when viewed from Station Road East, with the appearance that the height is greater than a single-storey structure. And then in March 2022, further application for a detached garage with a lower ridge height of 5.5 metres and a smaller footprint was approved conditionally. In terms of consultations on this application, there was no objection from Roads and there was no response from the Community Council. So just turning to the reasons for refusal of the current application, it's really the inappropriate scale and massing, which was considered not to reflect proportions of an ancillary building, and that's because they gave the appearance of a more than a single story. So it was felt to be overly dominant from outside the site and failing to respect the character of the surrounding area and the established pattern of development. And in terms of the trees, it was felt that the proposal didn't justify the loss of the 11 protected trees. And that overall the proposal was therefore contrary to policies on residential areas, design, trees and woodland in the adopted plan. And just adding also the policy in the proposed plan on amenity. So for the applicant contends that the new detached garage with first floor, that has been approved, albeit with lower ridge height, that the tree loss has been previously approved and that approved application could be implemented on site. Highlight there they're using the precise dimensions. So they said that 5.59 was previously approved and that this proposal would be 435 millimetres higher, with the extra height providing improved headroom and amenity. And they've just included in their statement the two comparison drawings. So you can see the two differences, the height of the ridge and also the depth of the footprint. So that's the east-west dimension. So from Station Road East, there would be no change between the approved scheme and the currently proposed one. It's the depth within the site that changes and the height. Further points made by the applicant. This is a large site in that there are 70 trees. The trees to be removed are spruce. There are no broadleafed ones proposed for removal, and that's recommended by the tree survey within 12 months, and that the situation with trees is unaltered compared with the previous approved proposal. They state that there's no visual impact by the increased size of the footprint. There are no objections, that the existing garage on site is too small for modern cars, that there have been various proposals, including amendments to reduce the ridge height from 6.7 metres to the now proposed just over 6 metres, and removal of the external stair. I think they're talking about the amendments through the whole process of the various applications there. They make the point that the eaves height would only be 57 millimetres more than the approved scheme, and that because the eaves run parallel to Station Road East, it means that the ridge is set back from the boundary into the site. Compared with the approved scheme, that scheme was a drastic reduction in the utility of the space, which I'll well, I've got the plans on the next slides that the applicant submitted illustrating that. They make the point that the stair is internal, which means that the garage would retain the appearance of a single story, that it's only 58 square metres in footprint, which is ancillary in terms of the plot size, the overall plot size, that it would be screened by the boundary wall, which is 1.6 metres high, and also by trees to the north and south. So I've just got a slide showing how the applicant has compared the the proposed and approved schemes. And I've just added the dimensions there. And then that's the elevation from Station Road East, so showing the two ridge heights, the approved and the proposed. And there are also no representations received. So at that point, I will hand back to you, convener, for you to decide how to proceed.
Thank you, Ms. Green. I was having a deep thought there. We now need to consider whether we have sufficient information in front of us today to take a decision on the application. Members, remember that if you do not feel you have enough information to take a decision, you can request that a site visit be undertaken and that further written information be provided, or that a hearing be arranged. Yes, I feel as if I got sufficient information to make a decision today. Councillor Clark.
I feel I've got sufficient evidence to make a decision today.
Thank you. Councillor Cook.
Me too.
Thank you. As members feel they have sufficient information, we now hear from Ms. Green on the relevant planning policies and considerations for this review.
Thank you. I'll just share my screen again. Sorry. Right. So in terms of development plan considerations, as I mentioned on the previous case, the proposed plan has not yet been adopted and the 2017 plan remains extant. Both sets of policies are relevant to consideration of the application. NPF 4 now carries significant weight as it's been approved by the Scottish Parliament and will be adopted in February. The site is allocated under policy H1 residential areas. And so residential development will be approved in principle in terms of that policy, dependent on the 4 criteria. So criteria 1, overdevelopment. Well, that's for members to consider, taking into account the large site and large garden here. In terms of criteria 2, the character and amenity of the surrounding area is a relevant consideration. There's no loss of open space here. So criteria 3, not so relevant. And then in terms of criteria 4, the householder development guide is again a relevant consideration. So looking at the householder development guide, there's specific guidance on ancillary buildings, and there are various criteria. So it states that they should be subordinate in scale to the dwelling house, and that two-story outbuildings are generally not permitted. Where there is a second story, it should be within a pitched roof and retain the impression of being single story, with dormers not being permitted. And it's also access to the upper floor should be from within the building. It talks about negative impact on the character of the surrounding area, in particular conservation areas. This isn't within a conservation area, so that's not so relevant. And assessment in terms of impact on the amenity of the area, daylight, privacy, sunlight, and that outbuildings are not acceptable in front gardens, which this isn't either. Policy D1 on design is relevant. And as I've mentioned before, although not all development is of a scale that makes a significant placemaking impact, good detailing and design adds to the attractiveness of the built environment. And this site is visible from Station Road East, being on that boundary of the garden. Further relevant policies are the trees and woodland policy, where there's a presumption against development that results in the loss of trees and woodland that contribute to landscape character and local amenity. Mitigation measures are also relevant in terms of that policy. And then policy D2 in the proposed plan, that's the one that talks about privacy, daylighting and sunlighting impact on other houses nearby. I've added this one in from NPF 4 because that now carries significant weight. The policy consideration in terms of protection and expansion of forests, woodland and trees. So in the most relevant criteria to this application is where it talks about fragmenting or severing woodland habitats. And so it defines woodland as land under stands of trees with a canopy cover of at least 20%, and that the minimum area is 0.1 hectares. So this, if you look at the sort of tree planted area within the plot and adjacent plots, it would actually be more than 0.1 hectares. So it would fall within that definition. And looking at mitigation, which is obviously proposed here in terms of the tree planting, there's a hierarchy that's proposed within NPF 4, starting with avoiding damage to the trees, then minimising the impact of that damage, restoring by repairing damaged habitats, and then offsetting by replanting on-site or off-site. Obviously, it's also a material consideration that there is an extant permission on this site which could be implemented and which would result in the removal of the trees. So finally, in terms of evaluation, the primacy of the development plan and that applications should be determined in accordance with the plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. And finally, basis for decision in this case. How would the proposal affect the design, character and amenity of the area set out in policies on residential areas, design and the householder development guide? Is the tree loss justified by the proposal? Noting that the existing permission is a material consideration. So does the proposal comply with the development plan, or are there other material considerations weighing for or against the proposal? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Green. Do members have any questions for Ms. Green? Councillor Cook.
Thanks, convener. Yeah, I've got a couple of questions actually. The first one is on the tree loss. So if we look at the existing approval, which is 211634 DPP, and look at the one we've got in front of us now, if I'm reading them correctly, it's exactly the same 11 trees that would be lost under this proposal as under the one that we've already approved.
Yeah, that's correct.
So if we wanted to turn it down, how can we legally do that, given that there's an existing approval for the loss of the same 11 trees? So I just want to get my head around the legal aspects there.
Well, what the decision notice does this on the basis that because the proposal itself, in their view isn't acceptable. It therefore doesn't justify the tree loss. So for this proposal, the tree loss isn't justified, whilst at the same time there is a previous permission which, because it was acceptable, did justify the tree loss. So that's the position that was taken by the case officer. It's
Thanks, Rafa.
also, sitting aside from that, it's a consideration that they could implement the permission.
Thanks. Yeah, I think I've got my head around that. And NPF 4, remind me, that comes into effect next month. Is that right?
Yes, it is a significant material consideration now that it's been through the Parliament. And I could also mention that there are several policies in it which support home working, which is kind of indirectly relevant in this case as well.
And again, my other one, again, I was trying to get my head around the plans and the dimensions. If I've understood this correctly, and I might not have done, this application differs from 211634 only in terms of the height of the building. Is that right?
It also has a deeper footprint. So it's the extent which it extends between the boundary wall on Station Road East into the site. So the approved scheme extended in 7.6 metres and this one is 6.75. No, sorry, the other way around. The approved scheme extended in 6.75 and this is 7.6. So yeah. The
Okay,
footprint
thanks.
enlarged.
And could you just show me again the site plan to see where it actually is in relation to the whole plot?
Yeah. So this is Station Road East. Oh, sorry, I've changed this. Oops. Go back. Do you want the wider site plan showing the area? No. That's North Deeside
fine.
Road. Station Road East is here, and that's the garage. So it's this dimension of footprint that's become slightly bigger, and the height.
So both this application and the previously approved one, the building would adjoin Station Road East, and it's just the in terms of the footprint, it's just coming further into the plot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And also the only point that you're going to be able to see it from is Station Road East. You wouldn't be able to see it from North Deeside Road, given that Station Road East is on a downward slope, and North Deeside Road, there are lots and lots of trees which will remain on the north boundary. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah, that's correct.
Thanks. I think that's it.
Councillor Clark, do you have any questions?
No, because John stole my question of wanting to see the map.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Cook nearly stole my question. I just wondered if we could have it's the heights from the road that would seem to be more critical, the actual height of the gable. And I'm trying to get my head around as to the height for the one that was refused, the height for the one that was approved, and this one. I'm trying to get a comparison between the the three of them, because maybe I misread it, but I thought that the height of this gable is very close to the height of the one that was refused.
Yes, that's right. It is.
Yeah. So the height and the footprint of this is very, very close to the one that was refused at the LRB. Is that correct? If I'm reading it right.
The height is, let me just get the plans out.
I've got 6 meters in my head, but
Yes.
that might be one of the other ones as well. So it's 6 meters. And the height for the original application, was that 6 meters as well?
That was originally came in at 6.7, but was then the negotiations on it.
So then it
which
went down.
reduced it. Just let me get the.
Okay. I'll leave you because this is got me confused.
Sorry, I'm losing my documents off the screen now.
I do apologise for asking a question like this, but I got confused when I was and reading through the papers. I just got confused, and I just want to know.
Yes, no, I want to make sure I get it right. So I'm just, but my computer's gone a bit. It's removed some of the documents I was looking at. Right. Right, the original, the application that was refused, the dimensions of it were that the footprint was 7.6 meters squared, which is larger than now proposed. And the height came in at 6.7 meters, but was reduced following discussions to 6 meters. But that failed to provide the reductions sought. So that went forward for refusal, and that was upheld by the LRB. So it was 6 meters, the refusal.
Right. Thank you very much for that. That's my question. See, Councillor Cook has got a question, probably leading on from that, I think.
Yeah, sorry about that. You know, earlier I said, can we see the site plan? And you showed it and you said, do you want to see the slightly larger area? And I said no. I now realise I should have said yes.
Right.
Well, sorry about that.
Okay, just a moment. I'll get the slides up again because everything's right.
What I'm interested in is where the new garage is going to be in relation to the houses on the other side of Station Road East.
Yeah. Right. I'll just share it. Okay, so
That's really helpful. So it's not basically the houses on the other side of Station Road East. It's not kind of in direct line of sight of those, or slap bang opposite them.
no,
Right.
that's right.
Okay.
That's the
Yeah. Right. Okay.
the
That no,
garages in
that's
there.
that's really helpful. And the height of this one compared to 211634, which is approved, it's 435 millimeters taller than the
Yeah.
approved one, which is what, 17, 18 inches in old money, thereabouts.
I'll have to
Sorry, I'm
take
old.
your yes.
Yeah.
I'll take your
Yeah.
advice on that one.
Yeah. Yeah. 435 millimeters. Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
that's right. That's right.
Thanks. I think that's all my questions now. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Cook. In accordance, no more questions? No, everyone happy? Relatively. So in accordance with the procedure note circulated, the local review body will now discuss and decide the manner in which the review is to proceed. I would highlight that all representations relating to this case have been considered and taken into account. This one's a very, very fine line for me. But I'm going to uphold the officer's recommendation. I would be concerned about the loss of trees normally, but as there's a possibility that they'll be removed with the existing planning permission, which could be implemented. I find that that's a little bit less relevant in this, because the approved, I do feel that the approved planning application is does have consideration on this. However, it is a very, very fine line with the difference in height, but I do think that it's the height that makes the difference for massing. It's not so much the width and length. I would have been quite happy with extending the garage into the garden. However, I think that there's the height, bearing in mind that this is the exactly the same dimensions and height was refused previously. I will be upholding the officer's recommendations with regard to policy D1. I'm not. I just think the height would actually have an impact. It is a very, very fine line, but there has to be a line somewhere. And I think that's that's it. Now, moving on to Councillor Clark, could you please state your decision in respect of the application, and state for the minutes the grounds for that decision, referring to planning policy where appropriate.
I was looking to overturn the decision on the grounds of H1, there is no loss of open space. The materials were in keeping with the house. There is no loss of daylight affecting the other residents. The loss of trees, I do understand where you're coming from there, but there was the replantation of more trees to the same amount. I appreciate what you say about the height, but my decision personally was to overturn the decision. That is a view.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Cook.
Yeah, I'm also minded to overturn the officer's decision to refuse. I think we should approve this one. I agree with you entirely. It's a fine line. It's not completely clear cut, but I think again, when I started reading through the papers, I was originally concerned about the loss of the trees, but then when you look at the one that's already approved, that was going to lose exactly the same number of trees, and it's mitigated by replanting. It also occurs to me that in the redevelopment of Union Terrace Gardens, we cut down a whole bunch of trees and got new planting. So what's sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander, and we do have a duty to be reasonable in arriving at planning decisions. So the only issue the tree issue for me is not relevant. It's not a barrier. I did think long and hard about the height, but it's not a huge increase in height. It's, you know, as the papers say, 435 millimeters, which is not a huge amount. It could be a significant amount depending on where it is, but the only perspective, the only area you'll see it from is on Station Road East, and it's not, which is a fairly tiny, not very well used road, and it's not opposite the houses on the opposite side of Station Road East. So if it'd been somewhere else on the plot, I might have taken a different view, but as far as I'm concerned, it's okay. It's compatible with H1 and it's compatible with D1. So I would be minded to approve the application, but that would be subject to, and take officer's guidance on this, subject to conditions. And I would suggest that the same conditions that applied in 211634 DPP, which is the one that's already been approved, would be my thought.
Thank you, Councillor Cook. As the local review body has agreed to overturn the decision by 2-1 of the appointed officer, we now need to consider whether any conditions should be attached to the approval of the application. Ms. Green, have you got, is what Councillor Cook said acceptable in just applying the conditions that apply to the approved planning consent?
Yes, the tree report recommends various measures, so yes, those should be covered. The mitigation planting and the surface of the works next to tree root protection areas of trees to remain. Yes, those are all relevant.
Thank you, Ms. Green. Any other comments from legal before we move? No. Please note that from the decision from notice today's meeting will be issued. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Councillor Hendrickson. No further comment.
Thank you. Please note that the decision notice for today's meeting will be issued to the applicant or agent in the forthcoming days. Thank you, everyone, for coming in. Oh, well, sitting at home or wherever and attending the meeting today. It's probably a good idea to stay in because it looks particularly cold out of my window. So thank you again, and thank you to Ms. Green, Mark, Lisa, and Gogo for all of their input today. Thank you very much, and I call the meeting, unless there's anything else. No, because I usually forget something.
No.
Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day. Okay,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Cheerio, folks. Bye now.
Bye.
Thank you.